What's up, everybody? It's Troy Cartwright. Welcome back to another episode of 10-Year Town. We are doing a little summer rewind this week, and we're going back to one of my favorite episodes, which is a conversation that we had with songwriter and publisher Chris DuBois. This was a two-part episode, so if you want to hear the second part, just go back in the feed to episode 48. We appreciate you. Thanks. Today's guest is the legendary songwriter and publisher Chris DuBois. You know him from songs like You Should Probably Leave, recorded by Chris Stapleton, and Mud on the Tires, recorded by Brad Paisley. And he is a co-founder of the independent music publishing company, Sea Gayle. This episode has so much in it that we actually had to break it into two parts. So you'll be getting part one today and part two next Tuesday. I'm so excited for you guys to listen to this episode. You're going to learn a ton. So without further ado, here he is, Chris DuBois. Well, I always start this thing off with the same question, which is, how long have you been in town?
Well, my story's a little different. I wasn't born here, but we moved here when I was 6 years old.
Okay. Was it for parents' job or something like that?
Well, it was, but it was so my father could pursue a career in songwriting.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So we were in Oklahoma. I was just a kid in Stillwater. I was born in Stillwater. My parents were at Oklahoma State University, and they were living in married student housing. And unless I'm wrong, my father was going to school full-time and working full-time at the same time and raising two kids.
That's crazy.
I know, it's insane to think about. But he graduated. We moved down to Dallas. He worked for the Federal Reserve Bank down there, and then he moved back to Stillwater to get his master's and was working on his PhD. He met Scott Hendricks and some of the guys that ended up being in Restless Heart, and was writing songs and started taking trips to Nashville. And I'm not going to give his story the justice that it deserves, but he got enough traction in Nashville that he decided to pack the family up and move to town. So I moved to town so my dad could chase his dream.
Gotcha.
So we moved here when I was 6, so I grew up here.
And I guess you kind of grew up around the music business.
I did. I mean, it was, I think of it like I think about my children growing up around the music business. It's not like they're with me down on Music Row every day. I don't bring my work home. We have 5 kids, and I grew up with just an older sister. So there wasn't nearly as much chaos in my house when I was growing up as there is in my house now. But but my dad used to bring his demos home and play them around the house. We had a reel-to-reel player in the living room.
Awesome.
1/4 inch.
Yep.
He used to bring his demos home and play them. And we had, musicians, the ones that didn't have family in Nashville would come over for Thanksgiving, and a lot of the Restless Heart guys would come over and hang out and play songs around the living room. And so, I grew up around it. And it wasn't really until I got into high school that I started listening to country music, because at that point it was like my dad's music. So I was listening to anything but, and it was, heavy metal, rock and roll, rap, old school rap, like the old Sugar Hill records. The first concert I ever went to was Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers when I was in 7th grade.
That's pretty good.
Damn the Torpedoes tour.
Wow.
Then I went to see 1984 tour for Van Halen at Municipal Auditorium, and that was just kind of where I was at musically.
Yeah.
And then when I went to high school, I had a couple of new friends. I played football. They listened to country music. I just thought that was bizarre. And then when I spent the night at their house, I'll never forget, they had the radio on like we were falling asleep. And I was laying there on the couch, and I heard like 2 songs my dad wrote. And I was like, my dad wrote that. These guys are actually listening to it. And I knew the songs, and I knew, other songs that were on country radio, and just almost overnight, I started listening to country radio.
Yeah.
And my dad would come home, and he's like, what are you listening to? It's like, I'm listening to country music. His version of country music was a little more pop. It was the Restless Heart stuff, like I mentioned, and stuff that kind of was more reminiscent to the Eagles, which was what he listened to and was very heavily influenced by. I was drawn more to the Hank Williams Jr., George Strait, more traditional kind of stuff. But But I became a student pretty fast of songwriters and started identifying the writers that I loved. I could turn a George Strait album over and look at the credits on the back and see how many Dean Dillon songs were on there, and I'd know if it was going to be a good record by how many songs Dean had on there.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
And was a big fan of Bob McDill's. I knew McDill was a big influence on my dad, so I just started paying close attention to the songs that he wrote and became a real passionate lover of country music. And when I got into college, I had been cutting grass for the summer, so I went to Knoxville, went to University of Tennessee, came home for the summer, and I said, hey, instead of cutting grass, do you think there's anything I could do around Music Row? I was 18. And he picked up the phone and called Bob Kirsch over at Polygram International Publishing, and I got a $5 an hour job making tape copies at Polygram. And that was really eye-opening. It was my first opportunity to see what the music business really looked like from the publishing and writing perspective. And it was Bob McDill was writing at Polygram at the time. I used to come in and hang out. I get to see him bring his new demo session in on raw quarter-inch tape, and I would take that quarter-inch tape and splice it to the end of his latest reel. I mean, their entire catalog was saved on quarter-inch reel-to-reel, and my job was to cut in the new demo sessions and then make cassette copies of them to pitch around town. But I loved the energy in the room. I used to stay after hours and make cassette copies of the songs I loved, and that's where I kind of fell in love with publishing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Let's take a quick break here to tell you about our friends, the Graphic Guitar Guys. If you've ever thought about having a custom guitar, whether for merch, a giveaway, or a unique VIP package item, Graphic Guitar Guys makes it simple. They've worked with some of the biggest names in country music, handling everything from the guitar to full color graphics and shipping, and it's all for one easy price. They're also a great option for album pre-sale bundles or fan collectibles. I've worked with Scott and the rest of the team myself, and they really do make the whole process effortless. Check them out at thegraphicguitarguys.com. Now, back to the show. So, did you, finish at Knoxville, or?
I did.
And then did you come straight back, or?
Well, I finished in Knoxville. I got a degree in accounting, which I only did that because it was kind of easy.
Okay.
They didn't have a music business program, and it was an SEC school. I mean, it was really learning more life skills than academic skills, things to do and things not to do, learning the hard way. But I would come home in the summers, and I did the Polygram tape room job for 2 summers. And knowing that I was studying accounting, I thought I should give that a try. So after my junior year of college, I went and took a summer job at Flood Bumstead McCready and Sales. Yeah. That's what they were called at the time, but I just did accounting work there, and I actually did that for 2 summers. I stretched my college experience into 4.5 years so I could get one more football season in hopes that we might beat Alabama, which we did not while I was there. But by the time I got my degree in accounting, I knew that I didn't want to work in accounting, but I'd officially graduated at that point. My father had officially turned the spigot off, so I needed a job.
Yeah.
And so I came back to Nashville, and I got a job working at O'Neill Hageman, which was another accounting firm at the time. They were located right there on 16th. And I did that. Before I did that, I actually took a couple of job interviews around Music Row for some creative positions, and I met with Gary Overton when he was at B&A Records, and I met with Donna Hilley at Sony Tree. And Donna was so sweet, and she spent probably an hour with me, and we just talked, and she told me she'd love to hire me, but she just didn't have anything, and at the end of the day, there just wasn't a job at the time, so that's when I took the job at O'Neill Hageman. But after being there about 9 months, I'd had enough, and I called my dad, and I said, I can't do this anymore. I said, I'm going to quit, and I'll wait tables, which I'd done in college. And he said, hold on, don't quit yet. He said, I've heard that you might be in contention for a membership job at ASCAP, which I didn't even know what he was talking about. But Donna Hilley at Sony Tree, who I'd met with and who was so sweet was good friends with Connie Bradley, who was running the ASCAP Nashville office. And Larry Willoughby had just left ASCAP to take a job in the record business, and they were looking for a young membership rep. So out of the blue, Connie called me and offered me a job in membership. So I would have taken that job for $5 an hour if I had to.
Yeah.
But actually got a decent salary and got an opportunity to work at ASCAP. And I had no idea what I was getting into. I knew the very basics about what ASCAP was, just from talking to my dad and asking questions about how he was getting paid as a songwriter. But, in a nutshell, my job was to meet with young writers and educate them about performance rights, how they worked, why they needed to affiliate with ASCAP, and to listen to their songs and critique them.
Yeah.
And most of the writers that come through the doors at ASCAP are looking for opportunities to meet with publishers.
Right.
So that's what I did. And I felt very in over my head the first month or two that I was there. I just sat in on meetings with other membership reps and watched them critique songs, and kind of identified the critique methods that I thought were good and the ones that I thought weren't so good. And then they just kind of threw me in, and I started meeting with writers, and they started playing me songs, and I would just tell them what I thought. Now, at that point, I had grown up around it. I was a student of country music, and I'd written a little bit, but it was never something that was a priority for me.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was going to be my long-term goal. And I was just kind of sitting there critiquing songs, and there was a young Belmont intern that started around the time I got hired named Brad Paisley. And he started coming in and hanging out in my office because we're very close in age, and because I was by far the youngest rep there.
Yeah.
And so Brad and I became fast friends. He was really the first guy my age that knew as much about country music as I did. So we bonded over that, and his writers that he loved and the writers I loved. We'd swap songs, and had no idea he was a musician or a singer or a songwriter until one day he came in carrying a guitar case, and I was like, I didn't know you played. Do you write? And he's like, yeah. I said, why didn't you say anything? He said, well, I just didn't want to overstep my bounds.
Yeah.
I said, well, play me something. So he did. He played me a couple of things, and I was in the mode of giving feedback at that point.
Yeah.
So as soon as he played it for me, it was the first song he played for me, I think, was called Before I Heard Your Name. Not a great song, but there were some great lines in it.
Yeah.
And there was one line that made the hair on my arm stand up, and I could tell right away this guy's different.
Yeah.
But as soon as he played it for me, my first reaction was to just give him feedback on his songs about the good versus what I felt like he could do better. And a lot of times when I would give feedback to writers sitting at ASCAP, I could see their countenance fall. It's like they were hearing rejection.
Mm.
And Brad was not like that at all. He picked his guitar up immediately and started changing it, and then he played me something else and kind of more feedback. And from that point forward, he would just come into my office every day and say, hey, what do you think about this? And he'd play me something.
Yeah.
And that led to he and I writing songs. And so I got very spoiled very quick. My first co-writer was Brad Paisley.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. So we did that. I was still entrenched at ASCAP. It was the kind of job where I met with writers every hour on the hour all day long, and would go to showcases at night. And I was single, didn't have a girlfriend. I was, able to go over to Brad's at 10 o'clock and write until 3 o'clock in the morning, and then go home and then wake up and do it again. And so we did that for about 2 or 3 years, and then he signed his first publishing deal with EMI, and ultimately went on to sign with Arista Records and cut his first record. And around that time, his deal at EMI was starting to come up. I was still working at ASCAP, and we just started brainstorming about how cool it would be to have a publishing company.
Wow.
So 27 years old, no idea what we were doing, and dumb enough to think I was smart enough to do it. And thankfully at that, because it ended up working out great. But in 1999, he and I and his producer, Frank Rogers, started Sea Gayle as a joint venture with EMI.
Wow.
Yeah.
So at this point, were you writing there as well? Like, what were they thinking that your role was going to be?
Well, at that point, I was kind of the business-minded guy.
Okay.
Frank was, he was signed to EMI as a writer. He was also signed there as a producer. Brad was signed there as a writer, and both of their publishing deals were coming up around the same time, so the timing was good. I had never signed a publishing deal. When I was working at ASCAP, I was able to keep all my publishing. So when Brad went in and cut his first record, there were 6 songs, I think, on that first record that we had written that I owned the publishing on. And so when we approached EMI about doing a co-venture, I was bringing my publishing in.
Yeah.
And then, we just kind of put all of our songs in a big pile and just split the publishing down the middle, and EMI owned half and we owned half. Wow. And my job at that point, there were no employees. It was just Frank would continue to do what he was doing as a producer, writer, and Brad was the writer-artist, and I was the writer-business guy.
Dang.
And we signed 2 writers that first year. We signed Trent Willman, was the first writer that we signed, and another gentleman named Tim Owens, who came through the door with a Diamond Rio cut. And so we knew that if Brad took off as an artist, that would give us a huge boost.
Yeah.
But we were just passionate about what we were doing and felt confident that even if Brad didn't take off, we'd find a way to make it work. But Brad took off, so it made it a whole lot easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it worked.
It did.
For sure. I'm very familiar with your writing game.
Right.
I didn't realize you were such a great businessman as well. So,
well, I mean, the days that I suck as a writer, I'm a businessman. The day that I suck as a businessman, what do you expect? I'm a writer.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
That's cool. So talk to me a little bit about building. I guess Sea Gayle's kind of had like several different iterations. When I moved to town, I guess I started coming up here in like 2015. And I feel like all my favorite writers were at Sea Gayle, and a lot of my friends were there, and it just, I don't know, it had such a cool culture. And
well, that was always very important to us. And I was able to see what a publishing culture could be, thankfully, while I was working at Polygram in the tape room.
Yeah.
It was a great culture there. How the writers and the pluggers just kind of, would hang out and brainstorm about song pitches and play songs, and you could just feel the passion in the room. So yeah, the culture, I think, was an extension of the fact that it was a company owned by songwriters.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of really successful songwriters that have started publishing companies since we started Sea Gayle 25 years ago.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was still a relatively novel concept. There were other companies. I know Little Big Town wasn't just a band on country radio. It was actually a publishing company at one point.
Okay.
That was owned by Bob DePiro and Woody Bonar and Kerry O'Neill, and they were a very successful independent company.
Yeah.
But Bob was one of the business cogs in that wheel. And there was another company at the time called Patrick Joseph Music, and that was Pat Higdon. And they had a great independent culture, and I was very enamored with what they were doing.
Yeah.
And I just felt like we could do that. And so really it does boil down to, what kind of writers are you signing? We signed 2 writers that first year. I think we signed 2 writers the next year. The next 2 writers we signed were Don Sampson, who wrote Midnight Montgomery for Alan Jackson.
Yeah.
And Rebecca Lynn for Brian White, along with other just great songs. He was a master craftsman, and Jay Knowles was the 4th writer that we signed, and he actually had written for Little Big Town previously. And then, so we were just building this roster of writers, and we signed another writer shortly thereafter named Jim Brown, who everybody calls Moose. He's a phenomenal session piano player. But Don Sampson, for example, started having cuts and success pretty quickly. Moose's first cut that he got was It's 5 O'Clock Somewhere for Alan Jackson.
Yeah.
And then around that same time, we also signed Chris Stapleton to his first publishing deal. And a big part of our culture at that time had to do with the very first employee that we hired, whose name was Liz O'Sullivan, is Liz O'Sullivan. And she just had that passionate personality. She's got a hilarious sense of humor and was just a big part of that culture. And she's the one that that told me and Frank that we just needed to hear this Chris Stapleton guy. So, so we got down in her office and listened to him play, and were able to sign him to his first publishing deal. And and really it was the writers' chemistry amongst themselves that created the culture that it was.
Yeah.
And thankfully, we were able to write with them too, in addition to just being their publisher. So it's a very unique scenario. But the first 10 years of our existence, we were a co-venture with EMI, and we had some really big, successful years. A lot of that had to do with Brad and his success as an artist. But Chris Stapleton started having big hits as a writer. I was fortunate to get on a good run as a writer and have some hits outside of Brad.
Yeah.
And of course, we had big copyrights like It's 5 O'Clock Somewhere. But when we got to that 10-year point, we knew we were in a financial position to go independent. So we broke away from EMI and became a standalone independent. And that was in 2009. And then in 2010, we won ASCAP Publisher of the Year. And then won it again in 2011. And according to ASCAP at the time, we were slated to win it a third year in a row, and then Sony and EMI merged.
Gotcha.
We couldn't overcome that one.
Yeah.
But I would say, I was very fortunate to win ASCAP Writer of the Year around that time. But when we won Publisher of the Year, I mean, that's still probably what I'm the most proud of.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
What are some of you've had quite a few hits. Is there, I don't know, one that sticks out to you or is extra special to you?
Well, I mean, Who Needs Pictures was my very first radio single. It was Brad's first radio single.
Yeah.
And the first time I heard that on the radio, nothing will ever replace that.
Yeah.
And that was such a huge emotional moment for me. I'm still proud of that song even after all these years, even though it makes references to getting film and a camera developed that my kids don't fully understand. Yeah. But I do love that song. Brad is such a good friend of mine and a huge part of my career. And, not only Who Needs Pictures, but probably Mud on the Tires. Yeah. I saw him do that last week at a show, and just hearing everybody sing along, that's one that I absolutely love.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, those are probably the two that come to mind quickly, but You Should Probably Leave, with that being the most recent hit I've had, I hear that now. And even though we wrote that like 12 years ago, I'm very proud of that one too.
Yeah. It's an amazing song.
Thank you.
Well, I guess you're kind of in this unique position to answer some of these questions I have, because my primary purpose for this podcast is to just give something for people that are just getting started on their journey to kind of, understand that everybody's path is different. But what kind of things you talk about, like building this songwriter culture at Sea Gayle, what kind of things, kind of grab your attention as a publisher that makes you want to work with a writer?
Well, it's always going to be the songs first and foremost. That seems like a cop-out answer, but in terms of what I look for stylistically in songs, it's that indescribable thing that just makes me go, yes. I used this as an example the other day. I said, when we were writing, I said, man, we need a moldy box of vanilla wafers in the first verse. It's just not interesting enough. And that's a reference to LA Freeway by Guy Clark. That's the kind of furniture that he would put in his songs. And the writers that are that descriptive and have good commercial instincts along with the artistic ability to paint a picture. I mean, some writers just have a unique gift, and those are the writers that we're looking for. I know that sounds like a big, broad answer, but it's also more than that. It's we're managing personalities too as a publishing company.
Yeah.
So if somebody walks through the door and is a brilliant writer, but is difficult to work with and becomes difficult to schedule rights with, that can be a huge challenge. So if a writer comes in with just great creative instincts, but also just a good spirit and a good energy in the room, that makes them very appealing to a publisher because you know that they're going to be easy to schedule rights with. That's it. I mean, nowadays, people ask all the time if we're more drawn to artist writers or just pure songwriters when we're signing artists/writers. And the answer is, it just depends on the writer. I'm looking for a unique gift, whether it's someone that's a pure songwriter or it's somebody that has artist aspirations. But if they do have artist aspirations, I mean, that the personality aspect of it becomes even more important.
Yeah.
Their willingness to put the time in that it's going to take on social media and, just being diligent about posting and things like that. As silly as it sounds, I mean, 25 years ago, that didn't even exist.
Right.
But yeah, work ethic, that's the other one. And you don't know someone's work ethic when you first meet them, but how they proceed after you express interest to them, I think is important too. Just showing.
In what way?
Well, I mean, I'll go back to like ASCAP. That's when I first started realizing it. When I would meet with songwriters at ASCAP and I would give them things that I wanted them to work on, and then they'd call me 3 months later and they'd come back in for another meeting and they'd play me the same 3 songs that they played me 3 months ago. It's like, what have you been doing? They're just still wanting publisher meetings. Now that's a totally different scenario from the writers that we're looking at as a publisher. But I always tell the writers, I teach a lyric writing class at Belmont, and they ask, how do you keep a door open at a publishing company? Really, it's about the songs. I mean, if you've met with a publisher and they've expressed interest, but they're not ready to put a deal on the table, the best thing you can do is reach back out to them with a song that you're really excited about and you can't wait for them to hear. Because that is what's going to close the deal. It's the new music that they're writing. If they call me and say, I wrote a song I'm super excited about yesterday, can I send it to you? The answer is always going to be yes.
Yeah.
So, just seeing the diligence and the continued drive that they have as a songwriter is a big part of it.
Yeah, that's amazing advice. That's some of the most, I don't know, probably useful advice that someone's actually given on this podcast.
Well, and I see it. I've seen it with writers that, we've met with. We like them. We may have connected them with some of our writers in our company, but, it's a huge commitment to sign a writer.
Yeah.
So when we express that interest, but the writer just calls to see if you're ready to sign them, and that's the reason they're calling, I mean, the answer is going to be no.
Yeah.
But if they call with new music, then yes, I've got 30 minutes tomorrow. Come by and play me some of your new music.
Yeah.
Or it could be, I don't have time, but send it to me. I'd love to hear it. I mean, once you've got the door open, the way you keep that door open is by sending great music. And the way that deal gets closed eventually with that publisher is going to be what you're writing, what you wrote yesterday.
Yeah. And not being afraid to hear feedback about, so I guess sometimes, you learn as you go, but it can be the first time you turn in a song or send a song to a publisher and they're like, this could be better, or have you considered changing this and that? That can be hard information to process at the
Absolutely.
beginning.
It can.
But, you kind of have to develop.
You got to learn at some point along the way that, it's what everybody else's opinion is that really matters the most. Because that's what you're going on. I mean, you're not going to be a successful songwriter if you don't care what other people think.
Yeah.
Because that's what's going to make money, is them going to play your songs over and over again. So yeah, you've got to open up to criticism.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of 10-Year Town. If you're still listening, you must have liked it. So we hope that you will leave us a rating or review on Apple or Spotify, or give us a subscription on YouTube. It's all free. Don't cost you nothing. But we appreciate you being here, and thank you for supporting the 10-Year Town community. See you next week.